My name is Magdalena Trinder from the University of Rzeszow, Poland. My presentation is an analysis of the correlation between gender and learning style in second language acquisition, a case study. In 2007, the Department for Education and Skills in the United Kingdom published a report into the correlation between gender and education, which was prompted by a marked increase in the performance and attainment of girls over boys. Indeed, at the age of 16, girls achieve an average of 10 percentage points higher than boys in the national GCSE examinations. This fact has inspired my current research into the influence of gender on second language acquisition, henceforth SLA, which is the main theme of my ongoing doctoral thesis. As a part of this research, it was decided from a very early stage that it would be impossible to examine the influence of gender in isolation, given that there are so many other factors which have been proven time and again to influence the acquisition process. Thus, this presents the results of a preliminary investigation into the correlation between gender and learning style, which has been conducted in order to ascertain whether or not there was a marked difference in learning style between the genders, and whether or not this in itself might be said to be able to account for any differences in attainment in SLA. The following presentation will provide a brief outline of the research methodology and, given the limitations of time, a very brief insight into the supporting literature and current state of research, which will be elaborated upon in greater detail in my article. Finally, the results of the pilot study will be presented and discussed in detail. The first question one has to answer when conducting research is connected with the very nature of the research. Here, one is faced with a binary decision at the very beginning pertaining to whether the research should be quantitative or qualitative in nature. Punch delves deeper into the general distinction between the two. Quantitative research has typically been more directed at theory verification, while qualitative research has typically been more concerned with theory generation. As it is my intention not to prove something new, but rather use modern tools to confirm the validity of existing theories, I have opted for a quantitative approach to my research. Having first decided upon the major question as to what type of research, attention shall now be turned towards the subject of the research, namely the groups under observation and analysis. This is an essential question from the perspective of the credibility of any research project or a case study, as there should be absolutely no element of randomness or so-called incidental factors. For any research to be reliable, it is essential to ensure that all potential factors that might influence the results of the data collected have been taken into consideration so that they might be factored into a discussion of the results, and their potential influence on any conclusions may also be considered. In this specific case, the choice of student groups to analyze was primarily dictated by the areas that were to be investigated, especially the question of learner style. Because of the specific and detailed nature of the learner style questionnaire that was used, it was considered of paramount importance that the participants in the study have a certain level of maturity and self-awareness. This automatically precluded any groups of young learners and infants, as they would require a completely different method of analysis in order to ascertain their individual learning styles. As a result, 5 groups were chosen. 3 are based in a private language school and 2 are university students in the first year of their bachelor studies, all coming from Poland and all being Polish citizens with Polish as a first language. The 3 groups which attend the private language school consist of a total of 21 learners who are more or less equally divided along gender lines. Also, their level is as uniform as possible without taking a group of absolute beginners, as they all correspond to the level C1 on the Common European Framework of References for Language. One of the primary reasons for the selection of these three groups was their age and level of language competence, as this would allow them to complete the questionnaire with relative ease. In addition, one important aspect of the groups in question was the proximity of their language competence. All three of the groups in question were involved in private language learning for an extensive period of time, and as a result, their level of linguistic competence was, if not ideally matched, at least comparable. This approximate uniformity is of incredible importance when it comes to the analysis of the collected data, as it would reduce the possibility of random response or answers based purely on conjecture. Another key aspect here is the motivation of the students. With younger learners, it is more difficult to be certain that the learning process is something which is a voluntary act. Indeed, many younger learners are compelled to attend private language lessons by their parents, meaning that their faithfulness as test subjects is questionable, either because of their lack of desire to learn or the fact that they may decide to drop out of the course. With older learners, one may safely assume that even if there is a negative attitude towards the language or the process of language learning, then at least there is sufficient motivation, either intrinsic or extrinsic, to guarantee that this will not have a negative influence on the acquisition process. Thus, in the case of the three groups from the private language school, the assertion can be made that, with the exception of gender, learner style and personality, which is subject to an independent investigation, they present a remarkably homogeneous sample for analysis. When it comes to the university students, there is a lesser degree of homogeneity. There are a total of 20 students, of which there are 6 males and 14 females, divided into two groups. They are also of a much greater diversity in terms of their age and social background. Their motivation is less diverse, as they are part-time students, meaning that they only attend classes every other weekend and also have to pay for their studies. And it may safely be assumed that they are attending voluntarily, without duress, meaning that there is a high level of intrinsic motivation across the sample. Given the entry-level requirements of Polish institutions of higher education, the minimum level of competence is B2, but there is a slightly lower level of uniformity, as some of the learners are level C1. However, the level of maturity and life experience means that they present a reliable sample in terms of the learner styles questionnaire. It is accepted by the author that in a perfect world, the demographic of the group should contain an identical number of male and female participants, but this was impossible to achieve given the fact that language learning in Poland is a female-dominated activity, especially in an academic environment. Thus, in future studies, this would be one variable element of the experiment which one would seek to rectify. Having discussed the general question of the type of research to be conducted and also the groups to be subject of investigation, we may now turn our attention to a brief discussion of the research tool employed in data collection, namely an audience response system which employs the use of PowerPoint presentations and student clickers. The